It's in the early stages, but could the Big 12 also add Oregon State and San Diego State? And would it be a good idea for the Big 12? Well, we're going to discuss that and more in today's video. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I am RC Maxfield here for the Back to 12 podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell if you want to be a part of one of the most interactive Big 12 communities here on YouTube. We had a hell of a week last week, a ton of comments and engagement, and it was awesome to see some of those new schools that were joining the Big 12 join the party when it came to this channel. So if you want to be part of one of the fastest growing Big 12 communities and one of the most interactive Big 12 communities on YouTube, hit that subscribe button to stay in the know right here. All right, let's jump into this. As Jason Scheer dropped a Scheer bomb, I don't really know what we call his tweets like this, but it was interesting to see. And this is what he had to say. Again, Jason Scheer of 24/7 Sports Wildcat Authority out of Tucson. Hearing Oregon State and San Diego State have had very preliminary talks with the Big 12 over the past 48 hours. Keyword is preliminary, and it could be at a discounted rate. Listen, when it comes down to it, I think this is really surprising from the standpoint of I thought 16, much like you guys did, was going to be the number where the Big 12 just kind of waited it out. And then they went in and they tried to attack the ACC. Maybe they went to go get UConn, whatever it could be, right? But it looks like they are going to strike while the iron's hot, or at least considering it in terms of Oregon State and San Diego State. Now, I do have a couple of things that I want to hash out here. Obviously, let's get the keyword out of the way right now before people come at me in the comments. Yes, it is very early on, and these were preliminary talks, right? For those that don't know, this is early on. Nothing is set in stone yet. But I do want to also point out this. Conference realignment can move quick. And when you have two teams, really one team, I guess I should say, in Oregon State that is kind of in no man's land right now when it comes down to it in terms of, are we going to be in the Power Five or are we going to have to merge with the Mountain West, right? They're going to be interested in potentially taking a little bit less money if that means later on they're safe when the new media rights deal comes along, which could be well into the future, right? Like 2030 or whatnot for the Big 12. But at least they know they're safe and they still make ample amount of funds to not lay that many people off or have to cut programs, right? But when you look at everything, as we all know, things go quickly, things can change fast. And I don't want to say this is going to happen because, in all honesty, I don't think it does. But I do like the aggressiveness of the Big 12 for going out there and seeing what that number potentially is for the Aztecs and the Beavers, right? Like, I really like that aspect of things when it comes down to it, to Brett Yormark. But I'll say this, if the number is right, like the number has to be right for all parties involved, probably more so the Big 12 than the other schools involved in this. I get the consideration. I really, really do. But there is something to remember here when it comes down to the San Diego State aspect of this. In order for them to leave the Mountain West, they have to pay a $30+ million exit fee. $30+ million. I believe it is a $34 million exit fee from the Mountain West. And honestly, good for the Aztecs that they didn't leave the Pac-12. Remember, there was consideration of that just a couple of weeks ago. If they would have done that, they would have had to pay the $34 million exit fee, and they wouldn't know if they're still in the Power Five, right? There is a scenario where the Mountain West and the Pac-12 merge. I think that's probably the most likely scenario right now when it's all said and done. But from a San Diego State perspective, does it make sense, right, for them to pay that exit fee and come to the Big 12? I'm not so sure. It's going to be interesting to find out, but I want to hear y'all's opinion. Do you want the Big 12 to add Oregon State and San Diego State, or would you rather them stay at 16 for right now, right? But answer this main question. Do you want the Big 12 to add Oregon State and San Diego State? Y for yes or N for no? All right, at the bottom of your screen is the updated Big 12 conference after the addition of Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah as well. But I want to talk about why this potentially could make sense for the Big 12, albeit I think it's unlikely more than anything. If the Big 12 wants to establish itself in that fourth time zone, it can do so here with Oregon State and San Diego State. Now, I'd be remiss not to mention with daylight savings and all that stuff, Arizona State will technically be in the Pacific time zone. But anyway, they already have multiple schools now in the Mountain time zone region, including Arizona State, Colorado, and obviously the Utah schools in Utah and BYU. So you have a firm footprint there, which would allow you to maybe potentially have a division in the West where travel wouldn't be as bad per se, right? You have that opportunity. Listen, this would also allow you, if you did add these two schools, to potentially have, I don't know exactly what we call them. I'm going to call them divisions, but 5-team divisions. And what I mean by that is you play those 4 teams in your division every year. Simple and plain, to keep rivalries alive. And then you play another division every other year, I guess every 3 years, right? And you play everybody in that moving forward, if that makes sense. So that gives you 9 conference games when it comes to football, and then you can figure out baseball and basketball and all that kind of stuff later. But I think that that's interesting. It would also allow you to have a firm grip on the late window when it comes to TV, because your only competition, well, it would be UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington, and who knows if they're playing teams that week at home, and maybe they're early on in the day or whatnot. So maybe you have a firm footprint in that late window if you're the Big 12, and that's something that's appealing to them. Remember, though, on the Scheer tweet, I have it right there for you on the bottom line. Remember, he said there would be a reduced rate. If it's in the 15 to 20 range, I think it makes a ton of sense from the standpoint if they've done their due diligence, and I don't think there's a reason not to think that they haven't if you're the Big 12, right? In terms of adding Oregon State and adding San Diego State, you get into a market like San Diego, that's good for you eyeballs-wise, simple and plain, right? You think about it, if you added a San Diego State to the Big 12, you would add 4 pretty big metropolitan areas to the Big 12 in terms of eyeballs and having the main school in that area. You think about Denver, you get Colorado, you get Salt Lake City with Utah and BYU. Phoenix, obviously the Arizona schools, and then San Diego State potentially if you add the Aztecs. There's some appeal there, if you ask me. Now, again, I want to preface this by saying I think it's highly unlikely. And I asked y'all on Twitter last night, follow me at RCMB323 right there. And with 800 votes, I simply asked, would you want to see the Big 12 add both Oregon State and San Diego State? Again, 800 votes. With 73.7%, it is no. I found that kind of interesting when it came down to it. But yeah, I think there's a lot going on here. And again, you get into another big metropolitan area. If you added San Diego State, we'll talk about it in the next video here on the channel. Maybe they just go the basketball only route and potentially add a school like Gonzaga. Maybe there's been some talk about that. But for now, I want you to answer one question for me before we get out of here. Do you want the Big 12 to add Oregon State and San Diego State? Just a simple Y for yes or N for no. And listen, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to join one of the most interactive Big 12 communities here on YouTube. We're giving you daily videos about the Big 12. Now, I'll admit this is a primarily Texas Tech channel. As you can tell from the Patrick Mahomes Texas Tech photo behind me, we'll be talking about the Red Raiders all year long, but don't get it twisted. We'll talk about the Big 12 as well, whether that's on the sports betting side, the latest news in terms of the hottest teams, who are the surprising teams, who's not living up to expectations, and much more. So you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button to stay in the know right here on the Back to 12 podcast channel.